The world's come to expect great things from UC Davis. The bold, the daring, the big ideas that do more than address today. They solve for tomorrow. Because we've never viewed better as before and after. Systems are ever evolving, and instead of letting them evolve around us, we change with them and lead the charge. We invite you to lead with us, answering the questions the world has yet to ask, educating the students who dream of a brighter, healthier, and more just tomorrow, shaping the course of what's happening to what can and should be. We keep the big picture in frame with a clear understanding of every detail. Bringing that image into focus, it takes a different way of thinking. A different way of looking at the world. It takes a fresh point of view beyond a single vision. The kinds of collaborations that advance what's healthy, humane, and right. The kind of approaches that push the edges of unconventional. The kinds of solutions that reframe what's possible. The kinds of leaders that reveal a new way forward. Big ideas that seem unimaginable at the start simply need the time and space to grow. To uproot injustice, to remove barriers, to break through, and to do it all over again, better. When the world calls on UC Davis, it expects great things. With your help, we can show the world it should expect even greater. Expect greater from UC Davis for the world.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chancellor Gary May. I'm so glad you could join us for another great Plugged In event. Today, you'll get an insider's look at how the UC Davis Department of Design is redefining what's possible through the power of innovation and collaboration. UC Davis has a long history of working collaboratively across many disciplines to tackle the world's most pressing challenges. It's through this culture of collaboration that we're able to empower the brightest minds to ask bigger questions, explore greater possibilities, and push the boundaries of what's possible. That's exactly what the UC Davis Design Program is doing. It's the only comprehensive academic design unit in the UC system. Their mission is to change the world for the better, and it's intertwined in everything they do. With a curriculum that spans visual communications, sustainable design, writing, and interior architecture, they offer a creative and flexible approach to the study of design, and they do it with an emphasis on socially responsible, human-centered, sustainable practice. This comprehensive approach has allowed them to unearth innovative and creative solutions to complex problems, and to be proactive in pursuing revolutionary ideas, like helping the sick and disabled and addressing climate change. You'll hear more about this today. We know they're doing something right because the design program offers one of UC Davis's most popular majors. The UC Davis Design Program gives students a chance to make a difference through design. Imagine a shipping container housing complex for lower-income families in San Francisco's Tenderloin District, or a business fashion line designed for professional women with disabilities that ensures custom-made fit by using a model form that resembles a seated body. These are just some of the many ways that innovation, collaboration, and creativity are powering new solutions and empowering our students to reimagine what's possible. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ari Kelman. I'm currently serving as interim dean of the College of Letters and Science. I joined the faculty at UC Davis in 2005 as a professor of history. I'm enormously proud to be part of the Aggie community. As I said, I'm currently the interim dean of the College of Letters and Science, or LNS. In that role, I provide guidance and leadership for the largest academic unit on campus. LNS has more than 30 departments, more than 100 programs across the arts, the humanities, the social sciences, and the math and physical sciences. My job is to do what I can to make sure that faculty, staff, and students all are supported and positioned to do their best within the context of a world-class institution like UC Davis. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you here today. I'm going to be serving as the moderator for this plugged-in event. In the course of the next hour, you'll get an insider's look into how our college's Department of Design is harnessing the power of innovation and collaboration, redefining national conversations regarding human-centered design. As the chancellor said in his video just a few moments ago, our Department of Design is one of our largest undergraduate majors. Not only are the faculty who you'll hear from today incredibly dedicated to the work that they do, work that improves the lives of the people of California, the nation and world beyond, but they're also incredibly dedicated to students here at UC Davis. With that said, the university wanted to host these plugged-in events for you, the members of the audience, the supporters of UC Davis, so we can stay connected with you during these times of physical distancing, times that are truly challenging for all of us. We want to keep you apprised of the many exciting things that are happening here on the campus. And we also, again, want to feel that sense of connection with you because you're the people who have been providing us with such valuable support that's kept us going. During today's event, just to give you a sense of exactly how this is going to go, I'll introduce each member of our panel. I'll give them the opportunity to discuss the innovation the ways in which they lead in their respective areas of expertise. After all of the panelists have had an opportunity to speak, each one in turn, I'm going to open up our conversation to a Q&A. All of the panelists will then join me on screen together. We will chat with one another and also with you. For those of you who have already submitted questions before the webinar began, we thank you very, very much for that. If you haven't yet submitted a question, please don't worry about that. You're going to have the opportunity to do so during the event. All you need to do is type your question in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question for a particular panelist, may I ask you please to be sure that you mention their name so that we know to which of our experts you're hoping your question might be addressed. After the Q&A, there's going to be a short poll that we'll ask you to fill out. This will give us some insight into the topics that you found most interesting today. It'll also help us plan for future events. And with that, I'm really very excited to get started. It's my pleasure to introduce to you UC Davis Associate Professor of Design, Brett Snyder. Brett, as you'll hear in a moment, is a remarkable professor. I know that you're going to enjoy hearing from him today. In addition to his work as an associate professor here on campus, Brett is also principal of Chang & Snyder, an experimental architecture studio based in Oakland. His work and research revolve around the intersection of architecture, media, and graphics, with particular interest in connecting people to their environment. Some of Brett's current research includes the UC Placemaking Initiative, along with one of his colleagues, Professor Glenda Drew, as well as Public Sediment. This is a resilience building effort in the Bay Area. His work has been exhibited internationally, including at the 2012 Venice Architecture Biennial. He's received numerous awards, including a recent Environmental Design Outreach Association Award for the community engaged design work that he's done with Public Sediment. And with that, I'll ask you please to join me in welcoming Brett.
Thank you so much, Dean Kelman, for the really nice introduction. Again, I'm Brett Snyder, and I teach in design. And my area of focus is the intersection of architecture and graphics. So in my work, this translates into an array of projects, many that fit into the category of participatory design and placemaking. What some of you might ask is placemaking. So placemaking refers to methods that designers use to connect people to our environment, often connecting people to the specificity of place, its cultural heritage, ecological function, for example. A couple of recent projects I would mention that I've worked on. One is called Fog Waste, and it's with the city of San Jose, which was to address a big problem that many cities face, which is caused by fat, oil, and grease, which enters our wastewater systems. And it can cause real harm to both the infrastructure, but also the local ecologies. So if you're like most people, you don't think much about where your water goes when it goes down the drain. But our collective negligence can actually cause severe environmental damage. While some might look at this as an engineering problem, San Jose, to their amazing credit, looked at this as a values and knowledge challenge, and one that is around how we understand our relationship to water and to the relationship of our infrastructure. And when I say we, in many of my projects, I collaborate with a colleague in landscape architecture, also at UC Davis, Claire Napawan. We often work very closely with different communities. In the Fog Waste project, we met not only with city workers, but we also met with several parents groups. And after listening and talking with people, we designed small interventions that help build awareness, but that work systematically, including things like painting trucks, manholes, and other things to really think strategically throughout the city about this issue. Now, not only did this project win various awards, but it also gave us opportunities to work on similar projects, including a somewhat similar initiative that we started just before the pandemic in Davis. Another recent project I've worked on that Dean Kelman mentioned is public sediment. And this was with the landscape architecture firm called Scape, based out of New York, that I would encourage folks to look at if you're not familiar with. This was part of the Resilient by Design Challenge that went from 2017 to 2019. We also worked with colleagues at other institutions, Cal, Stanford, and CCA, to really think at a large scale about how we think about building resiliency in the Bay Area. This project really thought about climate change, but it also approached climate change in a way different than I think one might typically think of. And similar to the Fog Waste project, we thought about Alameda Creek. Now, one thing I would just mention is in the last century, 90% of the marshlands around San Francisco Bay have disappeared. And a big reason for this is that sediment no longer reaches the bay. And so many of the waterways in our communities were kind of thought of simply as a problem of flooding. And one of the ways that we thought about this is the idea of almost unbuilding. And so our role in this project as designers was really about teasing out the way that people value the creek, value water systems, and think about their role in our communities. So what's been so exciting on this project is that through our collective efforts and the hard work of Senator Bob Wieckowski, we were able to help allocate $31.4 million towards the restoration of this creek. Working on these multidisciplinary projects has really allowed me to also bring some of these real world problems into the classroom. I'll leave it with that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brett. That was really terrific. I appreciate it. We'll look forward to hearing more from you in a moment when we get to our Q&A. Now, though, I'd like to introduce Professor Gozda Goncu Berk, assistant professor here in our Department of Design, the leader of the WEAR Lab. Dr. Gonju Berk's research focuses on human-centered design of textile-based wearable products for people with special needs, such as those suffering from chronic disease, people with disabilities, people who are elderly, and children. Her interdisciplinary work explores possibilities in electronic textiles and smart clothing, including new materials, digital fabrication technologies that might help us facilitate design for different body types, for environmental and activity-based contexts. Some of Dr. Gonju Berk's current research includes the development of reactive clothing. This is clothing that responds to anxiety through tactile actuation, also working on a face mask for children with adjustable fit and improved usability features, and 3D printed e-textile structures, which I could pretend that I know what that means, but I'm not even going to try. Her research, which is truly both innovative and extraordinary, has been published extensively in top-tier journals, leading journals in the field. She's presented at international conferences. She's also created multiple pieces of intellectual property. Please join me in welcoming Professor Gonju Berk.
Well, thank you very much for this fantastic introduction, Dean Kelman, and also excellent job in pronouncing not only my name, but also both of my last names. Yes, I am Gözde Gonju Berk, and I am passionate about pushing the boundaries of textiles and clothing, and especially their interaction with the human body in different contexts. My research tries to answer the question of how can we use clothing, new materials, and digital fabrication technologies to improve quality of our lives through design. And as this fundamental question frames, the first thing I do is constantly experimenting with new material and fabrication technologies to discover applications for electronic textiles and ultimately some form of a functional clothing design. Electronic textiles, or e-textiles, are the building blocks of smart clothing. That is the form of wearable technology that I'm very interested in my research. They refer to textiles with embedded electronic functions such as sensors or actuators, in other words, responses which are created through the transformation of electricity into things like light, heat, or movement. So the two fabrication technologies I lately focus on are computer-aided embroidery and 3D printing. And both of these technologies, they provide mediums to create shapes at 3D or 2D. So in my exploration with the embroidery machine, instead of using the machine to create beautiful motifs or appliques, what I explore is to embroider conductive threads to form soft circuits, electrode and sensor surfaces, and possibility of attaching sewable hard electronic components as an applique. Similarly, in working with 3D printers, I explore the possibilities of printing 3D forms directly on the textile material and creating a bond between them. I am currently working with flexible conductive filaments and experimenting, creating e-textile tracks and interconnections directly printed and embedded on a fabric structure to connect hard components like batteries or processors. And the second I do is constantly try to discover problems, discover the latent needs people cannot most of the time articulate or not even aware of. And my target in discovering these problems are the contexts related to health, well-being, and performance. And most of the time focuses on underrepresented user groups like children, people with chronic diseases or conditions, and extreme user groups like athletes. One of my current research projects focus on tactile stimulation through textiles by means of mechanical, electrical, or thermal responses to create different touch sensations as a response to change in a person's anxiety level, and explore the possibility of using this interaction as a calming agent. In the past, I have developed a smart glove that uses electrical stimulation to help with pain management of rheumatoid arthritis sufferers, worked on developing a smart belt that could monitor the bladder volume of people who don't have the awareness of their bladder functions and worn at a certain threshold, worked on another smart shirt that can monitor muscle activity, or running leggings that can provide targeted compression on muscle groups. And finally, the third thing I do a lot is forming very interdisciplinary collaborative teams. Because most of the times, the problems I'm trying to solve require multiple perspectives and expertise and knowledge in entirely independent areas. Finding people to collaborate with who are as excited as I am in solving a particular problem is a key. Currently, my collaborators are a professor of biomedical engineering from our biomedical engineering department, professor of neuroscience from UC Davis Health, textile artists and material scientists from Royal College of Art, UK, and professor of biophysics from a medical school in Turkey. So this is my research in a nutshell. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gosta. That was really fascinating. And now I'm going to turn to the last of our three panelists, Assistant Professor of Design and co-lead of the Product Design Lab at UC Davis, Tom Majorana. Tom's research focuses on the use of low-resolution prototypes that can help designers explore the human experience of interacting with complex systems. He's also a fellow at the John Muir Institute for the Environment here on campus, where he uses design thinking methods to inform the strategy and development of the One Climate Initiative. Tom is also the founder of Red Cover Studios, specializing in product development and innovation strategies, using prototyping as a central practice in work ranging from interaction design to fashion to organizational change. Again, I'm going to ask you all please to join with me in welcoming Tom Majorana.
Thank you so much, Dean Kelman. I'm thrilled to be here, and it's wonderful. I also love hearing from my colleagues. I feel like we have a fascinating department, which is one of the great things about working here. My background within design is actually quite varied, but design thinking has been one of the threads that run through it, whether I've been working in the field of interaction design or organizational development or any initiatives that I've developed. Really, a kind of human-centeredness is at the core of all those varied activities. So Dean Kelman mentioned that my work is around low resolution prototypes within complex systems. And I know that might seem really complicated, but it's actually fairly simple. I'll break it down for you. So low resolution prototypes are essentially a kind of versions of a final design idea, and that design thing could be something from an object to an initiative to an interactive experience. There's a whole range of what that can be and how you can apply prototyping to it. Now, low resolution prototypes are known as things that are, basically they don't take very long to make. They're also not, the materials of them are not fancy, for lack of a better word. They're not like the final materials. And they're often rather incomplete. They don't have all the elements that would be in the final version of your idea. And the reason that they're really effective is that the fact that you can build them quickly and they're cheap to make is that they offer this way to have a ton of exploration of an idea before you've really invested. And what that means is that allows for the designer to have this sense of humility, right? They can go and explore things without having to have this sense of certainty about having the right answer. It allows for this kind of potentially meandering and much more generative way of approaching how we design. And so what I do in my work is take these lessons of, low resolution prototyping that have come from, the design of physical products. And I think, how can we apply those to complex systems? And one example of a complex system would be, let's say, a policy. Uh, and so for the way policies typically work is that the stakes are really high and the scale of them makes them such that you really want to have as much confidence as you can about the efficacy of a policy before launching it. But typically what happens is they're analyzed for years, if not, decades. They're kind of the best understanding is put forth and then it's launched, and this kind of, let's cross our fingers and hope it works, right? Let's hope that people do what we thought they would do. And what I'm interested in is, how do we actually use more of a prototyping approach to create kind of more responsive, more human-centered, more kind of flexible and generative approaches to how we think about complex issues like policies. So one way this shows up for me recently, I've been working on a project around wildfire evacuation, and I've been working with some collaborators at UC Berkeley and the community of Bolinas on the coast and the city of Oakland. And what we're doing is using a low resolution prototyping approach to see how we can do more exploration around the complex event of a wildfire evacuation. Now there's many stakeholders, they each have different priorities, there's different jurisdictions, and there's police and fire and governmental agencies and community members, and all of them have a very different understanding of the issue. And all of them are expected to somehow do this on the first try, right? Wildfires, they're becoming more common, but they're still a fairly rare event that most people don't get to experience. So what I've done is, in this case, the low resolution prototype has been a tabletop game that basically surfaces different conversations, different issues that might not come up until an actual event, and brings those up before folks are under pressure so that folks have a chance to understand each other, to work through some of those issues in a low risk way, so that when they finally get around to using those inputs to create a policy, that policy can be far more tailored and aligned with what they've learned from the community, and the community is better prepared for something like that. So that's just kind of one example of how I use low resolution prototyping for complex systems. There's a bunch of different other projects I've worked on, but I'll leave it there.
Really appreciate it. Thanks again to all of our panelists for sharing their innovations in human-centered design. Before we dive into questions, I want to take a moment to comment on the importance of the research and the programming that our panelists are leading. It's because of these researchers and researchers like them throughout the College of Letters and Science and throughout the university that UC Davis is leading the charge in making the state of California and the nation and the world beyond a better place. We here at UC Davis take bold ideas, we create daring and innovative solutions. Each of our panelists today represent the campus's commitment to outgrowing the expected, to challenge the status quo, to form new questions, to show persistence in the face of adversity, and to find ways to help those who need it most. I am proud and also humbled to call them my colleagues. With that, let's move on to our question and answer segment. I'm now going to invite all of our speakers to come back on screen as we begin our discussion. We had a number of questions, outstanding questions that were submitted to us. We're going to dive into those, the ones that we got in advance of our event first. And then we will move into questions that we received during the event itself. So let's see, is everyone on screen right now? I see Brett, I see Tom, and I see Gozda. Okay, look, Zoom is working. Wonderful. 2021 really is a better year. So I have a question to begin, and this is for all of you. I hope you'll all feel free to chime in. Again, if we can make this conversational, I think the audience will enjoy that. I know that I will. It's fairly clear that all of you have very, very focused research agendas. All of you have done an enormous amount of work. You're very, very productive as scholars. I know that you're all also, as I said at the top of the event, excellent teachers. I'm interested now if you could talk with one another and with me about how you made the transition to working in the context of the COVID crisis. I'm interested in the pivot to remote teaching. If any of you have been teaching either last spring or in the fall, or if you're teaching now in the winter, and also how you've continued to do your work as designers. I'm going to ask you to think about, if it's all right, a couple of specific questions. One is those areas in which you've been surprised by new insights that you've gained either into your teaching or your research as a result of working remotely, and also those areas that have been most challenging, and how you, in particular as designers, have thought about ways that you might overcome challenges associated with remote instruction and remote work, with surviving during a pandemic. And any of the three of you can lead off. You know what, Tom, I'm watching you nod your head, so you just involuntarily stepped up to lead off.
All right, well, um, I mean, I think one of the things that has been pretty humbling, but I think instructive and related to both research and teaching is just that I think one of the things that makes design really fascinating right now is the fact that, you know, the kinds of challenges the students we have are the kinds of things that they are going to face in the prime of their careers, we don't even know exist yet, right? There's just so much uncertainty in terms of, you know, either whether it's technological developments or kind of implications for things like climate change. And I guess in teaching, you know, I started teaching with last spring where we, you know, launched and had to regroup. And I think it became an instructive thing to help them understand, like, hey, as difficult as this is, you are getting training for working and responding to uncertainty in the class setting. And I think that is going to be something that they're going to have to get good at. And so I think it's great that we've got the opportunity to help them, you know, in the relatively protected experience of, you know, the classroom, where they can start to get better at dealing with ambiguity and uncertainty. So I think that's one of the key things that's come up for me. That's why I was nodding. Yeah.
That's great. Gozda?
Yeah, sure. So it's been rather challenging research-wise, as my research is very hands-on and requires prototyping and testing things all the time. So yeah, I had to carry many things, devices, materials to home. Then I had to carry the home itself to somewhere bigger so I can have a space to work and teach. Those were the major things. And then this delivery and pickup became the essence of my research. There is this constant porch delivery from my students after they are done with a prototype. Then I take my turn, provide my feedback, and we would meet outdoors and I pass the prototype. So there's a lot of passing of things back and forth. And I'm working with multiple students at a time, and they're all different. They all have different skills, and we can no longer really work together. So I sort of feel like myself as like an orchestra chef. Now you do this, and then I pass on to the next one. Now it's your turn to do this, and then decide when to bring them all together. But there is also some positive things. We have now more emphasis in co-design, designing together with our users. especially specifically on this one project where we are developing a kid's face mask. We got to develop this almost like an activity coloring book sort of a thing that allowed us to collect data and help kids to us deliver their own ideas of what an ideal face mask would be. Normally this wasn't something we would spend time on. We would just go to a kid and talk to them and, you know, observe them. But all these remote challenges are making us more creative in the way we collect data. Well, teaching wise, yeah, I taught a sewing class without sewing machines. Yeah, so well, I had to really think out of the box, and some of my classes were really possible to do that. So we focused on connections that require no sewing, so puzzle-like structures. This quarter, we are looking into inflatables, so we are using irons and thermal bonding instead of sewing machines. And then the other thing that I found helpful in remote teaching was I discovered that I no longer need to try to bring guest speakers from overseas. They're just a click away. So I am benefiting a lot from international guest speakers, and we have a collaboration with Tec de Monterrey in one of my classes, and our students are going to be co-designing together for the half of the quarter. Yeah, so these are the things happening on my side.
That's great. Hey, Brett, we haven't heard from you, so I'm going to turn to you now and ask if there's been anything in particular that has sparked innovation for you, either in your research or in teaching during this time of physical distancing. Is there anything that's worked for you? Do you have any new practices that you've employed? Anything that's been particularly helpful, even just a coping strategy?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I definitely would piggyback on what Gozda just said, which is that I have definitely found the ability to, be able to collaborate with folks all over. That just that in some ways, while obviously there's varying, Wi-Fi and internet connections, the ability to be able to collaborate with people from other places. We've had people join for our placemaking talks. And actually, I would just say here that all the UC placemaking talks that we've had are available online, so people can see those. And I think, we recently had Teddy Cruz and Fona Foreman come and speak, and that was just an amazing opportunity that I think we wouldn't have had in normal times. I would also just add that previously, if I was going to invite a guest, from New York to come and speak as a guest critic, it was often very hard actually to do that in the classroom if you had guests there physically, because you'd have some competition between the person who's really there and then the person who's trying to chime in online. And in some ways, this has been an equalizer in terms of, just being able to give that kind of equal footing. We're also just trying to record all of the things that we do. So again, recognizing that not everyone has, at all times equal internet connections. And it has definitely made me, think about some of, issues of equity and trying to think about how we can best serve the most people during the most amount of time. And I think that, that's always a challenge. It's a challenge in the classroom. When we even think about things like costs of materials. And I think certainly for me over these past, months, thinking about what do people have in their homes that are going to be able to contribute to these without, relying on too many resources. And I think that has been both a challenge and an opportunity, because I do think in some ways it has opened up new opportunities. Along that line, a lot of the things that we're doing are, if we were looking at a a project that someone's doing in a classroom, only a small amount of people are seeing that project. And I think this is in some ways given other platforms to students that maybe were not there before.
So to our audience, I'm going to let you know that we had prepared in advance to work our way through a number of questions that we received prior to the event. But because we're working with 3 innovators, I'm going to ask them to innovate on the fly here. I want to involve the audience that's with us as well in the moment. So I'm going to turn to a question now that I think is really interesting. We have a number of departments in the College of Letters and Science that for prospective students are what I would describe as legible, which is to say my home department of history or the Department of English, or for example, the Department of Philosophy. Students understand what those disciplines mean. They have a sense at least of what study in those disciplines might entail. A Department of Design for a high school student may be relatively unfamiliar. Design is a capacious discipline. It encompasses a variety of different things. And so Mark Miller asks, what's the best way for someone just entering high school to prepare for a career in this area? What would you recommend to young people who would be inspired by the kind of work you're doing? What should they be thinking about as they're entering high school, even before they matriculate at UC Davis? Because of course they all want to come here. I'm fine with any of you stepping in. Otherwise, I'm gonna go to, let's see here. I'm gonna go to Gozda.
Yeah, so advice to high school students. Yeah, I would say most of what we do is problem solving. So getting themselves familiar with this idea of how to create ideas to solve the problems for another person that is not themselves. So building empathy for people who are not like themselves, and using that empathy and understanding of those groups, how can you tackle certain problems is the essence of what we do, I guess. Either we are designing a built environment, a clothing, or a product. There's always this problem solving. But before that, problem finding stages that we have to go through, getting themselves comfortable with those stages, and also getting comfortable with, accepting ideas without any judgment at the beginning, and then slowly elaborating on those ideas. Yeah, so design and creativity is not something that happens, like magically. Like you don't come up with this fantastic idea suddenly. There's a lot of research and effort behind that. So yeah, I think being aware of that is a good thing too.
Just building on what Ghost is saying, I think typically one would think of a design student or design someone that intends to head in the direction of design as having a strong art portfolio. And I would just mention actually that at UC Davis, undergraduates actually do not submit a portfolio to come to the design program. And I actually think that's a good thing in that I want to say that we have so many students who are dual majors or have a minor in another field. And I want to say that that kind of cross expertise, I think, is one of the things that is just amazing. And of course, I love being at Davis because it is a research university and we have these kind of abilities at the teaching level to cross with other departments. But I mean, even at the kind of student level, I love having students that, are just come from another background where maybe they're also in engineering, or they're also in landscape architecture, or they're also in, another humanities department or social sciences. And I think those, having that as a kind of background can just be such an amazing thing for, a student. So I would just add that.
Yeah, I'd just love to hop. There is I love this. Ezio Manzini is a social innovator and a design theorist, but he has this idea of design being this innate human ability, so that everyone is a designer. And one of the ways he breaks that down is having a critical sense, so seeing something and imagine that it could be different. An imaginary sense of saying, hey, it could be different in this way, and then the practical sense of, and I'm going to make that happen. And so I would say anyone in high school, I think like, just flex those muscles, be critical, be imaginative, and then also like make it real. And I would say make it real by drawing, because drawing is going to, get you far within design. There's a lot of variation within it, but I say drawing is a grounding element.
Great, thanks very much. Actually, Tom, I'm going to stick with you. I've got a question here, and I apologize if I get the last name, if I butcher this. This is from Christopher Caprillian. You talked about working with multiple stakeholders, Tom, to solve complex policy problems. So Mr. Caprillian would like to know, when dealing with complex systems, one of the pitfalls can be a lack of consensus on what a problem is, or ensuring that a group is working towards solving the right problem. How did you work with various communities? Can you give us some specific examples? Communities, government agencies, to develop consensus, around consensus building, particular on the nature of a problem of wildfire evacuation, for example, or if you want to draw from some other element of your career.
Yeah, I would say one of the reasons that there's so much pressure to get the thing right is because there's often this sense that like we only have one shot at it. And so I think to kind of release that pressure, that's why I like a prototyping approach, because it allows consensus to come through iteration. And I think that allows people's voices to be heard, which is often one of the reasons folks get entrenched. So when I was helping to launch an initiative with my partner at the Hive at the Claremont colleges, we had all these very different stakeholders, and we only had 45 minutes a week to work with them. But the idea was like, listen to voices, reflect what we heard through something that we've created, and then use that as a way to understand, like, are we getting closer to what you all are saying? And I think having an external artifact is a good way to build consensus, because it becomes less about the ego of me versus you and more about us driving towards what usually there's a shared vision. So that's the kind of short answer for it. But yeah, I think it's by prototyping, you minimize the pressure to get it right the first time.
That's great. Thank you very, very much. And so this is a question for Gozda. What recommendations do you have for beginners or intermediate designers looking to focus on humanistic issues, including design for people with disabilities? You just muted rather than unmuting, which is just the most wonderfully 2020, 2021 thing ever.
Yes. Here we go. As I said, I think empathy is the key. Putting yourself into their shoes, and not only their shoes, but also their caregivers' shoes, is very important. Looking at the problem from multiple perspectives. And in my work, I try to mostly focus on making everyday life easier, which could be entirely different from a typical everyday life. Imagine like you have only one arm. How would you button your shirt? Imagine you receive nutrition through a feeding tube implemented in your stomach. Then what's your interaction with clothing? So in providing functional solutions to these problems, functionality on its own is also never a good solution. You can't really compromise the aesthetics. They still need to look beautiful, be fashionable, be trendy, because clothes have such social attributes, right? They affect how other people perceive us. they affect how we feel about ourselves. So you do really need to come up with something that's really functional, customized to the problem of that person, but also at the same time very trendy and up to date and fashionable. And actually, when you design by keeping disability at mind, you often come up with solutions that are better than you would design for the norm most of the time. So there are actually examples of that in the industry as well. If you know the OXO Good Grips products, especially the peeler, which was actually designed based on somebody's needs who have dexterity issues and rheumatoid arthritis. Yeah, so these are like my suggestions.
Thank you. It's my beloved peeler, by the way, that you've just described. So I now have a question for the full group. I want to end on a question about, again, challenges. These are difficult times. And I'm curious, pre-pandemic and just more broadly, what are the most common mistakes that you see designers making? Not your colleagues, of course, because we're all error-free, but in the world around us. You don't have to name names, but are there any particular areas where you just see things that could be avoided, particularly if people were using the kinds of approaches that you've talked about, where it's either consensus building, community orientation, the kind of empathy that Gozda's talked about, the openness that Brett has mentioned. I'm just interested in the ways in which you think about those challenges and then solving them.
Yeah, I would jump right in and say, I mean, one concrete example comes in during the pandemic, which is that, you know, a lot of cities opened up, you know, streets for kind of closing off of streets. And there was a lot of pushback from different communities. And you know, there is a reason that they didn't speak with communities first. And of course, everyone's trying to pivot and move quickly, you know, especially during the time of the pandemic. But I think if there's just one pitfall, I would say, you know, that designers should avoid, it's not speaking with the communities that you're designing for before you design. And I think that is just such an important step. And even just to understand where people are, where they're coming from, what, you know, we have a saying with a lot of the projects that we work on, which is like to meet people where they are. And I think that idea is that, you know, you can translate that in many ways. And one of them might be that if you have a meeting, not everyone's going to necessarily come to your meeting, but if you go to someone's meeting and meet with them where they are, whether it's meeting with a parents group to, you know, talk about a particular issue in a community, or it's speaking with a community before you design something, I think just that idea of involving communities and things that we work towards, and I'll leave it there.
Tom, I see you nodding. Yeah, I just want to note that it's important for everyone to realize that university administrators and particularly interim deans never make that mistake. We always reach out to all of our constituents before we make any decisions that might be controversial. We're deeply engaged with our community and we have a very, very transparent and open decision-making process. All right, go ahead, Tom. I know that you want to build on that point.
Yeah, well, yeah, I wish all administrators were more like you. It's, yeah, I mean, I would say just building on Brett's thing, I think the main mistake is just, I think, failing to have humility. And I think that's a really challenging thing, because we need to hold, as a designer, you need to hold this confidence of like, I think I have the right answer, but you also need to be open to being absolutely wrong. And I think that's a really difficult thing to hold, but I think that is what we need more of, so that there's a kind of responsiveness within design. I think human-centeredness is a piece of that that's absolutely necessary.
Great. We've got a minute or two left, Gozda, if you want to.
Very quickly, yeah, following up on what Tom said, I mean, I'm just going to talk about things I observed in younger designers, like falling in love with that single design solution and not really believing anything else is possible is one of the biggest mistakes. And actually, the other big mistake is being afraid of making mistakes, because that's such an important thing that helps you to come up with things that are outside of the norm. That helps you to discover new opportunities. So we all make lots of mistakes in our research every day so that we can come up with better ones, better ideas.
That's
Yeah.
great. All right, thank you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience for your really thoughtful and outstanding questions. We appreciate that. There is one last step today. I'm going to ask everyone if you would take a moment. You should either now or in just a moment see a poll appear on your screen. There it is. If you could take just a second, this won't take long at all, and answer these questions, I would appreciate it. And then in just a moment or two, I have a few closing remarks for you. As you're taking the poll, I'd like to again thank all of our panelists for taking the time this evening to share insights into how the UC Davis Department of Design is innovating and collaborating, how it's changing the world for the better. Again, I'd like to thank all of you in the audience, not only for joining us today, but also for your philanthropic support. You can't know how much it means to us in the university that you support us in this way. As the Chancellor highlighted in his video at the top of this evening's program, UC Davis is home to the only comprehensive academic design unit in the University of California system. This positions us uniquely as a leader in interdisciplinary innovation in creative design. Whatever your passion may be, there's a way you can help to support it. If you're interested in giving to any of the initiatives that we discussed today, then we would very, very much appreciate that. We hope you're all staying healthy and safe. We look forward to connecting with you, we hope in person soon. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you all very, very much.